Hi there. Thanks so much for joining us on Tips for the Transition, the Career Roadmap, where we empower women to navigate career and life transitions with confidence and purpose. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, and each week I bring you inspiring conversations that invite you to see things differently and approach them with resilience and courage. We stream live weekly every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific time on the E360 TV network, which you can find on your favorite streaming platforms like Roku and Apple TV and Amazon Fire. And we go live simultaneously on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook, where you can interact with us. And if you prefer to listen to your favorite shows, we're on all the podcast channels as well. So if something inspires you today and you want more, please subscribe to your favorite channel, leave us a comment, share your favorite episodes so we can create more ripples in the world for women. So, question, are you in midlife and mid-career? You might feel things shifting and normal patterns are being interrupted by uncertainty if you are. If this strikes a chord, you are not alone. Today, we're talking about something that just doesn't get enough attention, I think, the incredible power of midlife for women. My guest, Jennifer Arthurton, is a former Fortune 500 marketing executive who made a bold shift during midlife, transforming her journey into an opportunity to mentor and inspire women at this time in their lives. She is the founder of Old Chicks No Shit and hosts a podcast of the same name. Jennifer believes that midlife is the most powerful chapter of our lives. And I don't disagree, but it takes some courage to face it head on, right? She's here to explain why this is the time for women to step into their authenticity, reclaim their power, and create a kick-ass next chapter. And she'll share her midlife reinvention story as well. So if you've ever felt overlooked or doubted yourself in midlife, this conversation will reignite your confidence and help you embrace your potential. So let's get started. Hello, Jennifer.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Thank you for being here. So before we get into your midlife story, why do you believe women are more powerful than ever in midlife?
Oh, this is a topic I could talk about all day long, and there are so many reasons for this. First of all, we have had years and years of experience. We have amassed, a wealth of knowledge. We've conquered challenges, overcome problems, done all the things. And so we have, a bank of knowledge and wisdom and experience that works in our favor, no matter where we want to go. And then you add to that the fact that by this point in our lives, we know who we are, right? Like we know our strengths and weaknesses. We know what we're capable of. And there's nothing more powerful than that level of self-understanding, of self-knowledge, combined with, everything that we've amassed through our lives. And as we step into that authenticity and start thinking about how it is that we want to give back to the world or what's the impact that we want to leave, it really does add up to a powerful combination. And the only reason we doubt ourselves is because we live in a culture that tells us that, midlife is the beginning of the end, which is so far from the truth.
I'm so glad you said that because there is a lot of self-doubt that comes at this stage in our lives, even though we know if we are self-aware, right? Even though we know we've amassed all of this good stuff that you just talked about, the self-doubt still lingers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So we're going to talk more about that in a minute. I would love for you to share your midlife transformation.
Yeah, I
Tell
would
us
be
about
happy
that.
to. So, after a long career in, the corporate world, 25 years plus, kind of found myself at the pinnacle of my career, having kind of achieved all of my objectives, my goals, my desires, um, you know, was living what I would have called, and by what all accounts would be deemed a very successful life. I had the job, I had the title, very well paid, great perks, married, had a, a child, a nice home in the suburbs, all of the things. And then in the year leading up to my 50th birthday, so in a very short space of time, I found myself divorced, unemployed, an empty nester, and I was bedridden with a stress related illness. And that really, all of that transpired in a way that really had me questioning who I was, because all of the roles and titles that I had assumed in the world, so wife, mother, corporate executive, and at the time I was like, big into fitness and all of that, that was all stripped away from me. And I realized that without those titles, without those external roles, I had no idea who I was or what I wanted for my life. Being an ambitious woman, like, a lot of you listening, it was just like, here's the path, go, go, go. But nowhere along the way did I actually stop and ask myself, like, is this really what I want? Is this truly making me happy? Because I had a mission. I was just, on on the road, on the path, so to speak. And when I realized that I had no idea who I was or what I wanted for my life, it really was a bit of a wake up call for me. And after, throwing myself a big, long pity party for longer than I would care to admit, I started to realize that I had a whole chapter of life ahead of me. So, maybe 30 or 40 years, God willing, of life ahead of me. And that this was what was in front of me was not necessarily the end like I had, thought it would be, because the question in my mind was, who starts over at 50? Is it even possible? What are my options? And I didn't see that reflected anywhere. But when I came to this realization that I have a chapter that's maybe 30 or 40 years, like the longest chapter of my life yet, I began to realize that it was actually an opportunity for me to live a life that was on my terms. That truly made me happy, that made me feel like I had a sense of meaning and purpose in the world, and something that just really, fulfilled me. And that's when I set about kind of figuring out is, okay, through a long, spiritual and personal development journey, was figuring out, okay, who is the woman underneath all of these roles, and what does she want, and what's important to her? And that, I said that in a nice few sentences. Honestly, that journey was eye-opening. It was a struggle. But I learned so much about myself that I would never take any of that back. In fact, everything that happened to me, I consider now to be a true gift, because I wouldn't be where I am now had that not occurred the way that it did.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because yeah, it takes hindsight to know that, right?
Right.
But when we're going through it doesn't feel like a gift.
It does not.
Does not feel like a gift. Yeah. I love that you said that, though, because the journey is of self-discovery,
Mm-hmm.
digging deep, digging in, inside, and deciding who we want to become,
Yeah.
and then figuring out, how do we build the bridge to get there?
Yeah.
There's work in that. There is work in that, and it takes a little time, and it takes a lot of support.
It does. It does.
So I'm so happy you shared that story. I'd love to dig into it just a little bit
Yeah,
more with you, if you don't
absolutely.
mind. Okay, so I just said it takes a lot of support. Tell us what kind of support did you have through that journey?
Yeah. And you are so, we were never meant to do any of this stuff alone. As much as we, ambitious, achievement oriented women want to, we do it on our own and do it ourselves. we were never meant to do it alone. And asking for help, I think, is one of the biggest things that we can do on this journey, right? And that takes an immense amount of courage to say, I need help.
Right.
So one of the things at the beginning of my journey was I knew that my life, the way that my life was and how my life had evolved, was a direct result of how I was showing up in my life, right? Like I was the cause of what was happening in front of me. And so I knew that in order for my life to be different, then I had to show up differently in it. And at that point is when I hired my first coach, basically because I wanted somebody who could see the things that I couldn't see, who could call me on, the things that I might have been doing wrong or could be doing better or could have a better perspective on. And you know what, as I always say, you can't read the label from inside the jar, right? So I needed somebody to be able to reflect back to me the things that I needed to see. And so whether, you do that, I did that in a formal coaching relationship, but, whether it's a good friend or a family member or whatever, just being able to reach out and say, hey, I need you to help me understand myself better, to understand my perspectives and feed something different back to me. But it doesn't really matter where we get the help, but we just need that person outside of us to be able to offer additional perspectives that we can't see.
That's so true. It's like we need somebody to see our blind spots, right?
Yeah.
Because we
yeah.
all have them. We
We
all
do.
have them when we're in the midst of it. It's that old adage, the forest for the trees kind of thing.
Yeah.
We don't have the big picture from where we stand
Right.
in the middle of a crisis like that, right? Where in your case, so many transitions were happening at the same time in a very short period of time. Plus, your health was impacted.
Yeah.
So your ability, your resilience went down to nothing, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, your immunity, literally and figuratively,
Yeah.
to handle all that tough stuff at the
Yeah.
same time. I mean, we all need help. We all
Yeah.
need help. And you're so, so right. I love the Helen Keller saying, right? Alone we can do so little. Together we can do so
Yeah.
much. It's so true. In community, whatever. And sometimes we need more than one person, right?
Oh, for sure.
We
For
need
sure.
we need different kinds of help and understanding what that is and not feeling um, shame or guilt that
Mm.
we need to ask for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that we as women do so well is the shame and guilt, right? Like
Right.
we take whatever's happening outside of us and we turn it inwards onto ourselves. Because, as I was, and this was really the true gift for me was, I was physically, mentally, and emotionally incapacitated at that point. And I couldn't, all of the things that kept me busy in my life were taken away. And so I was really confronted with myself and was really confronted with my life. And there was nothing I could do to run away because had I had a job or had my kids still been at home or whatever, I would have found a way to keep myself busy. But what happened was I kept looking at myself and thinking, what's wrong with me? There's something wrong with me because everybody else's life is going along just perfect. And here am I, sitting in the middle of ruins. And, it's interesting that, when I think back on it now, probably, 4 to 5 years before the end of my career, I would find myself in a boardroom, sort of half listening to a meeting, and I would be thinking to myself, is this it? Is this really what I wanted? Is this what I worked so hard for? Because I mean, I gave it my all to get to where I was.
Yeah.
And I would immediately shut down that little voice because I was like, well, if it's not this, what is it? And I didn't have an answer. And the thought of, blowing
Therefore,
up.
We stay on the treadmill, right?
Right,
Or
right.
the
We
hamster
stay on
wheel,
the track.
whichever one you're on, right? Yeah,
Exactly. You stay on the track because you can't envision anything outside of what you've done, what you've just been doing, and you've invested so much to get there. The thought of
right,
blowing that all up feels like crazy talk.
right. Of course, of course.
Yeah.
And that the crazy talk may not only be coming from inside our heads, but other people saying
Yeah.
to us, "What do you mean you're thinking about leaving?
Oh,
What are
yeah.
you changing? What you've got it?
100%.
Look, you got it great." But then I think we find ourselves living up to other people's expectations,
And that's the thing. Right? I
and
mean,
that's
that whole career trajectory that I was on was like, I say this all the time. As women, we are handed the rules of the game really early. From the minute our feet hit the planet, right? Like we are told this is what it looks like, right? This is what you do. You go to school, you get a good job, you work your way up the corporate ladder, you stop, you get married, you have a couple kids in there, you do all the things, right?
yep,
But nowhere on that list does it say, hey, check in with yourself. Is this really what you want to be doing? Is this
right,
truly making you happy?
yeah,
And that's exactly what I did. And I kept saying to myself the whole time, I've done everything right. How could I end up here? Right. But
yeah,
to your point, it was
yeah.
following a list of what I thought I should be doing or what was expected of me, as opposed to what was truly in my heart, like what truly made me passionate and
What
excited about my life.
matters most, right?
Right.
To you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not what
Exactly.
matters to not what matters to other people for you, right?
Right.
They think
Right.
you should, this is the path you should be on. And you're right. I mean, this happens to us. It happens to men too, right?
Of course. Yeah.
The societal rules, right?
Hmm.
The expectations, right?
Yeah.
We're raised with them.
Yeah. For sure.
Uh, I think some of our younger generation are getting it earlier than we
Yeah.
did,
For sure.
and I hope that's true.
Yeah.
And that they don't end up in midlife, questioning everything we've done up till now, right?
Yeah.
And why we did what we did and where it got us. But I believe that everything happens for a reason,
Yeah.
and whenever we become enlightened, quote unquote, awake, right, to what it is that matters most to us, that's the time we get to start over.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I when I think about the generations coming behind us, I mean, they have a different set of role models than we did. Like the women of our generation are very different than our mothers and grandmothers. We had so much more opportunity
yeah,
than they did, right? So we didn't have somebody modeling what it meant to live as a midlife woman, right?
right.
Because, they were very much relegated to home or
Yeah,
whatever that was. And not to say to everybody, because there were some incredible midlife women who have gone before us, but it wasn't in the same volume, right?
right.
And I look at my daughter and, like I interviewed her on my podcast to see how her perspective was different than mine. Because honestly, I didn't give too much thought to what was I going to be doing in my 50s. Like that just never entered my head.
Yeah, right, right.
Right. And so the younger generation watching us modeling, having a second chapter, maybe a new career or branching out in a different way or whatever that is, right? It opens more doors of possibility for them.
And earlier, right? If you
And
can
much
do it at
earlier.
50 or 60, as I did, right? Then maybe I don't
Yeah.
have to wait. Maybe
Right.
I can ask myself those questions now.
Right. That's exactly the thing. You can ask those questions in your 30s and even in your
Right?
20s. Like, am
Yeah.
I truly happy? Am I doing what is making, what's important to me in my life? And course
Right.
correct. Yeah,
Right.
so true.
Right. Yeah. All right. So, you mentioned this word earlier, and I've heard you call this um, midlife the chapter of authenticity.
Mm.
Let's talk about that for a minute. Why do you call it that? What do you mean by it?
Yeah. So, and it's very much aligned with what we were just talking about how we, assume roles and responsibilities that are expected of us throughout our lives. So, whether it's our career or, a role in our family or our wife, mother, like whatever that title is, we do what we need to do to become who we need to be to fulfill those roles. And then as we reach this chapter of midlife, anything that starts to feel uncomfortable to us or no longer realigns with us, it's the opportunity for us to, it's the perfect opportunity for us to kind of like now sink back into what masks was I wearing? What truly belongs to me versus what was an expectation? Because, as like midlife really is the perfect time because when you think about it, everything is changing outside of ourselves. So physically, through menopause, mentally and emotionally, our kids leaving home, everything, the foundation that we have had for most of our lives is shifting. And at this juncture is where we start to question everything like, who am I? What do I want? What's important to me? And this is where we start to find, just by sheer fact that we are asking ourselves these questions, is where we get to hear the answers. Like, is this still serving me? Am I on a path that I want to be on? What do I want more of in my life? What do I want less? And in the answers to their questions is where we find our true authenticity. And usually within that authenticity, like discovering who we are at the core of our being is where we find our greatest gifts. So, if we haven't, tapped into our greatest gift up to this point in our life, it's now the perfect opportunity for us to see it and to decide how it is that we want to use it.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there.
We'll start at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, but this is a bit of a paradox, isn't it?
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
Like I call this, the midlife paradox because in so many ways we are stronger, smarter, better than we've ever been, but yet we doubt ourselves more than we ever have.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're kind of sitting in the middle between these two things. But when you start to unpack it, you realize that this whole notion of how women should show up in the world, about age and about beauty and all of these things, right? They're all messages that are external to us, right? I saw a stat one time that said, we see something like consciously and unconsciously, we see 3,000 images a day of what a woman is supposed to look like. And the average age of that woman is below 30,
Mm.
right? So we're comparing ourselves to some external thing, right? And as women, we've been cultured to see our value in like, our ability to have children, our bodies, what we do for other people. And so when all of that starts to change, right, we start to question our value. And that's where the doubt comes from. But if we can start to shift our perspective away from, external validation and to really tap into what we know and who we are, I mean, that's where the power lies. I mean, there's a $1 billion business convincing us that we shouldn't have wrinkles or gray hair or any of that,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it
Multi-billion
takes
dollar business.
multi-billion-dollar business. Exactly. So it takes
Right.
awareness and courage to be able to say, hey, they're not talking to me because I'm focused on what's happening inside here, not what's happening on the outside.
Right. And it starts with the concept of self-love,
Yes.
right?
Oh, yes.
So if we can just sit with who we are and know that we are good. We are good. We are good
Yeah.
people. We've got a good heart. We're kind. We're compassionate. We're empathetic.
Mm,
That's who
mm,
women are.
yeah.
Just that's how we are designed. So
Exactly.
if we can just sit with that and feel it to our bones, right? And
Yeah.
love ourselves the way we are.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
and decide what it is we want differently. If we don't like the way we look, decide that you want to change it, but let that be your decision,
Yes.
not
Yeah.
because somebody else said you should,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. I mean, I am 100% for women doing anything they want to do that makes them feel better about themselves, like
Yeah,
whatever that is. But when our sole focus becomes the outside, we are missing such a huge and important part of the puzzle, everything that you just listed. And I think we'd be hard pressed to find a woman that at some point in her life didn't have some kind of issue with, her hair, her face, her body, or
right,
trying to conform to an expectation of that.
right.
And that again requires some awareness and a heaping pile of self love to come into full acceptance of who we are and that we are made perfectly exactly as we are.
You hit on the nail on the head, so to speak, with that word, acceptance.
Mm, yeah, it's
So,
powerful.
yeah, so we just have to, um, we don't have to do anything, right? But it would be good if we could accept all of it's like the warts and all,
Mm,
right, of who
mm,
we are, because we are a product of all of the things, and you talked about this early on in this conversation, all of the experiences, the wisdom
mm.
we've developed, the mistakes we've made, the challenges we've overcome, the mistakes we've made and corrected and done differently the next time, what we've learned, what we've taught, all of that is all part of who we are today.
Yeah.
And embracing that
Hmm.
is
Yeah.
even that makes me feel even better than accepting it, right?
Right.
Embracing that, and feeling that authentically, and then coming from that place,
Yeah.
showing
Yeah.
up in that way. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, the energy of showing up in acceptance and, and to your point, embracing our story and who we have become as a result of that story, like is so powerful. I mean, you can literally change the energy of the room by walking in and holding, that in such high regard. Right. Like
right.
all of these things that happened, to your point, the mistakes that we made, the experiences that I've had, the problems I've solved, the challenges, like that's the story of me. Like
Yep,
that's what's made me into me,
and it's
right?
unique.
And it's unique and it's perfect exactly as it is. Yeah.
Yep, yep. Yet we can give away our power so easily,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
So let's talk about that for a minute.
Mhm.
How do we give away our power? But most importantly, how can we reclaim it?
Yeah. You know, we give our power away in big and small ways every day without even realizing that we're doing it. So, even from small things like we were just talking about, like buying into the notion that I need to look a different way, right? That my hair is going gray and maybe it shouldn't be gray. To saying yes when we really want to say no because we've seen our value in, what we do for other people. To and probably, the worst way that we give our power away is just not believing in ourselves, right? Like, I'm not smart enough, or I'm just an accountant, or I'm just a stay at home mom, or I'm just whatever box it is that we put ourselves in, right? So, whenever we allow those beliefs to take over, we diminish our potential because we are so much more than any box that we've been put in. So whether it's a wife, a mother, a corporate executive, a job title, like whatever it is, that is one dimension of who we are. And when we can only see that dimension, we are leaving so much on the table because to the point that we just made, like there's a whole story that's led up to who we are that has created all of this multi-dimensional potential within all of us. And all it takes is a little bit of belief in ourselves and what's possible to then be able to access to access that. And that, when I see a woman who has a dream or a desire for her life, and then she says, but I can't because I'm too old, or I can't because I have never done this before, or, I'm not smart enough, right? That's giving our power away. And if we can just, like I said, believe even just a little bit, even if we believe only 20%, we're taking some power back for
Right.
ourselves and opening the doors to new possibilities.
Yeah, that's so true. And sometimes we can borrow belief from
Yes.
someone who believes in us without question. We can look at that and go, can I have just a little of that? And borrow the belief until you believe it yourself.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that is the number one reason why I started the Old Chicks No Shit podcast, is because when I was, at that crux of having to like reinvent my life, I was looking around and I was going, okay, where are all the women in their 50s and 60s and 70s who are, have reinvented their lives and are doing incredible things in the world? And I was looking around and I didn't see it reflected back to me anywhere. But when I started to dig and find these stories, I was so incredibly inspired by the things that they were doing and the hurdles that they had overcome to get there. And it really gave me that, if they can do it, I can do it too.
Yeah.
And so I started to collect those stories in the podcast because I knew that if that was the inspiration that I needed, that there were other women who needed to hear these stories as well too.
Yeah, and that's so true. Though,
Yeah.
yeah. It's one of the reasons I do what I do, because I'm inspired every week
Mhm.
by the conversations I have with
Me too.
my guests like you. And I continue to do that. And I think if I'm inspired, someone else, even if it's just one other person out there,
Exactly.
someone else will be inspired by this conversation too.
Exactly. And and the beautiful thing is like when we share our stories are powerful because people can see themselves in some or all or a tiny part of that story. And as soon as they see themselves in that story, it gives them, like, it empowers them to now then take that next step. Maybe they wouldn't have taken that step before, right? But now they can see that it's what's possible for them and they'll take that next step. So it really is so
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. So again, surrounding ourselves with
Mhm.
women who have crossed the bridge we want to cross,
Yeah.
right? Who are
Yes.
on the other side of that and are examples for us, whether we walk
Mhm.
their path or another path to get to a similar place, it doesn't matter. But
Right.
they are a role model
Yeah,
to show us what's possible, like you said.
exactly.
If we
Exactly.
understand that there are possibilities out there, then there's hope, there's room for belief, and
Mhm.
we have to muster that up, right?
Yeah.
And then we have to squelch that inner self talk,
Yeah.
the
Oh, yeah.
I can'ts,
Yeah.
or I shouldn't because
Mhm.
I'm too old, I'm too whatever,
Right.
because none of that is true.
None of that is true. Like, the stories we tell ourselves 99.9% of the time are lies,
That's
right?
right. They're
There are
lying.
beliefs that don't belong to us, things that we've picked up along the way, but there is no truth in any of them.
Right.
And,
At this stage, right? And that's what we
right.
have to examine, right? Because those
Exactly.
beliefs have served us well in some way, shape, or
Exactly.
form over the years. But
Yes.
now we get to look at them, kind of pick them up like a Rubik's Cube and just turn it in all which ways and
Yeah.
ask yourself, is this true for me now?
Right. Right.
And if
And
it
is this serving
isn't,
me? Yeah.
then we get to decide, what do we want to believe instead?
Right. Yeah, it's so powerful. And this is one of the reasons, why we owe it to ourselves to really step into our potential, because, not only are we doing it for us, there are people watching us. Maybe they're in, other women in our lives, or, somebody that we meet, or even if it's our daughters or granddaughters, like
Right.
we are opening up all kinds of doors for them as well too. And so there's this beautiful ripple effect that happens, like when we take the step forward, when we, do the thing that we think we couldn't do. It's not just about us. There's a beautiful ripple that's happening across the world. And that's part of why, I also view this time of life as being so powerful, is because we're just changing expectations. We're changing notions of what's possible,
Right.
right? For the rest of time, one woman at a time, stepping into
Right.
her greatness.
Right. That's so true. When we think about, and I talk about ripples all the time,
Mhm.
when we think about just the, one step forward for us, that
Yeah.
might be a difficult one, right? It
Mhm.
might be way outside our comfort zone. But when we take it with courage, when we take it with purpose, we are proving to everyone around us that it can be done,
Yes.
right? If we can do it, so can they,
Yeah.
right? And that matters. That matters. And I know that I have met so many women who don't think they matter enough to
Yeah.
show someone else that what's possible, right?
Yeah.
That it won't matter. It won't matter what I do. Oh, it matters. It so
Yeah.
matters because we are influencing the people in our circles to
Yeah.
either think that it's not possible or
Yeah.
that it is.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we as women do so well is to downplay our accomplishments,
Uh-huh.
right? It's like, oh, well, I just did what I had to do, or it wasn't that hard, or whatever the excuse is. And
Or
one
it
of the
was a team effort.
Right. It wasn't just me. And one of the things that I have, I run a mastermind group called the Maven Collective for women who are reinventing themselves. And when we start talking about that topic, they have what they call the badass list, right? And so it's this list of all the things, like professionally, personally, whatever it is
Yeah.
that you have accomplished and overcome in your life. And there's something really powerful about writing them down. So
Yep.
taking it out of your head and putting it on paper, because I've had so many women say, wow, is that really me? Right? You see yourself in a very different perspective. And when you see the sum of everything that you have accomplished in your life, things that you think are tiny and insignificant, you see them all together and you start to realize this is a amazing life resume, right? Like you see your life in a much
Yeah.
bigger perspective.
Yeah.
And you can see how it matters.
And it builds confidence,
It,
right?
Huge confidence builder.
Huge
Yes.
confidence, right?
Yeah.
So it's like an activity I do with my clients, and it's a deep skills assessment. And when
Mhm.
you figure out what are all those skills, and that's really hard for women to do
Yeah.
because they think, oh, that's just the way I do things. It's not a skill. Oh, yes, it is.
Right.
And
Exactly.
dig into that skill and ask yourself, so what makes me really good at that? What makes me an expert at that? And now
Right.
there are a whole bunch of hard and soft skills that come along with it, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, when we write it down and we look back at it, we go, dang, I'm good. I'm smart. I
Yes.
have wisdom. I have experience. I have knowledge. I can teach all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Right? When
Exactly.
you think about how you can influence others by just the journey you've been on,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
huge power in that. And
Huge power.
and the confidence is what, when you start to build that confidence about who you are and how you can share that, all of that wisdom with others. This is great. That's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
There's your power right there.
Yeah. And, we've amassed so many gifts in all of
Yeah.
those, things that we've accomplished. And like those gifts are meant for us to pass on.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so
Right.
whether it's through a new career or starting a business or even just passing on to the people that we know and love, right?
Yeah.
Like we have gifts that have been created through all of that life experience. And now it's our time to share it. And that's why I call these the Maven years, because if you look up the dictionary definition of the word Maven, it says an expert with knowledge and wisdom to share.
Oh,
Right.
I love that. Yeah.
And, if you look at kind of the typical archetype of a woman's life, it goes from maiden, mother, and then it goes to crone. And Maven and mother, okay, fully self-explanatory. But every time I saw a crone, I would think about this like old wizened woman on the mountaintop. And I'm like, wait a minute, what happened to the years between, when my kid left home and, I become this old woman on the mountaintop? There's a whole like gap in that archetype where we are like, old enough to know, to have this body of wisdom, and we are young enough to actually put it into action and see the results of it in our lifetime.
And continue to live and learn and teach, and because
grow.
the journey is
Yes.
not over, right?
Not even close.
Our growth, our evolution is not over.
Yeah.
In so many ways, it has begun a kind of a whole new life cycle.
100%.
Yeah. Oh, this is such a great topic. I am so glad that you and I found each other and had an opportunity to talk about this today.
Yes, me too.
So I know that you have some tips to share with us about things we can do to get clarity and find meaning and purpose in these Maven years that we've just talked about.
Yeah.
What are some of those?
Yeah. I think the first thing and the most important thing is to stop what you're doing and spend some time connecting with yourself. Because as women, we are do, go, taking care of everybody and everything. And most often we are on the very bottom of our to-do list. The part with the dust and the tumbleweeds is usually where we are on our own lists. And so taking time every day to just connect in with yourself and get to know who you are and what's important to you is so critically important. And it doesn't need to be, a big thing. Like you don't need to spend, an hour in meditation every morning. It could be as simple as, grabbing a cup of coffee and, sitting for 5 minutes in the silence of the house before everybody gets up, or a short walk in nature, or doing something that you love. But the idea is to do something that, where you don't have a phone or a book or, TV or anything. It's just like spending time with yourself and asking yourself, like, what do I want? What do I need? What would I like how would I like this day to go? And just like hearing your own voice, because that I think is the first step is, connecting back and building a relationship with ourselves like we would if we met a new person, right? We would spend time with them. We would ask questions of them to get to know who they are, because 90% of the women who end up in my world have become so disconnected that they don't know who they are or what they want for their lives.
Yeah. Oh, you're so right about that. I just want to stop you there.
Yeah.
Because you just gave us a golden nugget. Talk to yourself as if you are some new person you just met.
Yes.
What questions are you asking?
Yes.
Yeah. I love that, because that's a great analogy for us to take away. Because when we do that, we're asking different questions, right?
Yeah.
We're exploring. We're curious.
Right.
Right? So how can we get curious with ourselves and spend that time? And I would add to that idea, write it down.
100%.
Write down some of the things that are coming up for you and don't worry that you're not a journaler, that you're not a writer. Stream of consciousness writing is perfect at this point in time, right? Just write
100%.
down the words and the phrases and the thoughts and the feelings that are coming to you.
Yeah.
Good,
that's
bad, or indifferent.
Yeah. And I always encourage people to, like, even if you're not a journaler, just, grab a notebook, a scrap of paper. And like you said, just write it down, because sometimes when we give these things a place to live outside of our heads. So I don't know about you, but up here it's noisy,
Yeah.
busy. There's a lot going on,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
when we write that question down or write that answer down and it's on paper, all of a sudden we can see it slightly differently. Like we can have a slightly different perspective on it that we might not have seen. And the beautiful thing is, if you keep a journal of these things, you will see the evolution and the commonalities and the things that repeat that are like, oh, And to your point, to get curious about them, why do I keep asking myself that question? Or why is that always the same answer? Right?
Right. Or why does it keep coming up?
Yeah.
Yeah. And some of the, here's one prompt that you could use you could use the same prompt every day and you could have different answers. What
Mhm.
matters most to me today?
Exactly. I love that question.
Yeah. And like I said, today is different than tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's different than what you thought yesterday.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what matters most to me today? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Another
Yeah.
tip.
Um, and we talked a little bit about this, is to challenge our stories. So we tell ourselves stories about what we think we're capable of, based on our experience or who somebody told us we were. And, you alluded to this earlier on, is like, when we find ourselves in a story about whatever it is, ourselves or a situation or whatever it is, and asking ourselves, is it true? Like before we go into, oh yeah, that's absolutely, I believe it, and then we go down that rabbit hole, is to just be aware that we're telling ourselves a story and then ask ourselves, is this actually true? Is there another way that I could look at this? Even if it was true yesterday, is it possible that maybe it's not true tomorrow? Or maybe, if it's something, for example, that, well, I don't know how to, it's like, well, could I learn how to? Right. And it's just challenging the stories, because 95% of our thoughts are a repetition from the day before. And we are telling ourselves stories constantly
All the time.
about, who we are, what we're capable of, whatever that is. And just having enough awareness to recognize that we can challenge those stories, and that, as we alluded to earlier, 90% of those stories, in fact, I would argue that 99% of those stories that we tell ourselves aren't exactly true. And here's
Yeah.
a perfect example from my life. When I was 6 years old and learning how to print, I had a teacher who, very, very old teacher, who would tell me all the time that I wasn't a good writer. So I carried this with me for the longest time, for my entire life. And, I would say, oh, I'm not a good writer. I'm not a good writer. And then one day I started questioning the fact that, like, wait a minute, how do I know I'm not a good writer? Is because she told me that. But the context of which she was telling 6-year-old me you're not a good writer is because my printing was going outside the lines. It had nothing to do with my ability to, convey an idea or to construct a sentence. Totally different things. And when I started to challenge that
Mm.
idea, I actually figured out that not only am I a really good writer, I actually thoroughly enjoy it. And that's
Oh,
an example of stories that are given to us that we've picked up along the way that are no
yeah.
longer serving us.
Yeah, that's such a great story. I'm sorry that happened to you and that impacted you for as long as it did. But that's the kind of story that we've all grown up with,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
You're not good at this, whatever this is.
Mhm.
I grew up thinking I wasn't good at sports. Well, I
Right.
had 3 older brothers, and they were excellent at sports, but I was the only girl, the youngest, and my father said, "You're not good at sports."
Mm.
So I never got involved in sports.
So never
Never.
tried. Yeah.
Never tried. Never tried.
See,
And
we all have those stories.
what I know I missed now, because my husband is an athlete and he is a team athlete in
Right.
basketball and football and baseball, and the camaraderie is what I miss.
Mm. Right.
So I seek that now in other ways because I know that I missed it for so long.
Yeah.
Because it's not true that I'm not good at sports. Today it's
No.
true because I've never practiced it, but
Right.
what I've excelled at as a result of that story, me learning that story wasn't true, is being a master connector, being a person that,
Yes.
just gravitates to learning about people and thinking, who do I know that she needs to know, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. So you're so right about that. That's such a great tip.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other one that I would say is really important is allowing ourselves to daydream a little bit. So, we all have these ideas or notions of things that maybe, we want to do, whether it's a career or whether it's just a personal pursuit or a physical challenge or whatever it is. And often what happens, and I see this all the time, you'll ask people, like, what do you want for your life? And they'll tell you what this idea is. And then they will tell you, like, within seconds, the reason why it can't happen. Oh, well, I'm too busy. Oh, I'm not tall enough. Oh, I'm not smart enough, or whatever it is. And they literally take that idea, that glimmer of an idea, and they squash it instantly with their words and beliefs. And here's the thing. Our dreams and desires are not random. They are parts of us that are wanting to be expressed. And if we can allow ourselves to play with these dreams and ideas, to daydream like we did when we were kids before people told us to, stop daydreaming and get back to work, if we can allow ourselves to just play with the idea, like, what if? What if I did, start to run a marathon? Like, what if I did, decide to start that business? What could that look like? And to play with the idea in your head. And the reason why we want to do this is because as soon as we give that idea some space and a place to breathe, it will grow. And when it grows, right, the more it grows, the harder it is for us to ignore, right? So when it comes up and we squash it, it's like, okay, moving on. I got to go do whatever it is I got to do.
Right.
But the more we play with it, the bigger it becomes and the more alive it becomes in our minds. And to the point we made earlier, if you take that idea and you write it down and said, what if? Like, what if I became a stunt driver for a movie production house, right? Like, what would that look like? And write it down. Again, we are, seeding that in our subconscious mind, right? And it becomes harder and harder to ignore the more we give it a chance to grow. So whatever that dream or our desire is that we have for our life, let's not squash it. Let's just play with it. Let's just give it a little bit of space for possibility and growth and to see where it goes. Maybe we don't end up becoming a stunt driver, but we get a cool job on, a movie set, like whatever that is. But
Right.
as long as we don't squash it with our limiting thoughts and beliefs, we can give that a place to grow. And it's a representation of some part of us that wants to be expressed.
Yeah, I love that. And there's another great question you can ask yourself. Why not?
Why not?
Why not? Yeah. Just
Yeah.
allow the possibility to just expand. And
Yeah.
like you said, it may not end up being exactly as you imagined it, but there will be something there, some piece of it
Yeah.
that if you give it the room, if you give it the space, you give it the air to
Yeah.
breathe and you breathe life into it, why not?
Why not? No, exactly. Why not?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
so good. Great tips. Jennifer, I've so enjoyed having you on the show.
It's been
Thank
a
you
lovely
very much.
conversation.
Yes, it has been. And I know that there are going to be lots of people who are going to want to reach out to you and reach out to listen to your podcast called Old Chicks Know Shit. And I might love to be on that
I
podcast.
think I think you might have to be on that podcast.
We might have another great conversation, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So let people know the best way for them to reach out to you, connect with you, and learn more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach me on my website, which is oldchicksknowshit.com. So that's KNOW, not NO, although it works too. So oldchicksknowshit.com. And there you can find links to my mastermind program, the podcast, and events that I'm also running. And then my favorite playground on social media is Instagram. So you can find me over there and is on LinkedIn as well too.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you for being here, for sharing your wisdom and your stories and your great, inspiring nuggets of wisdom.
Thank you for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
My pleasure. And for those of you who are watching and listening, I want to thank you for being a part of this community. If you enjoy this episode, as I said earlier, please subscribe, leave a comment, share your favorite ones so that we know that you're enjoying what we're doing. Because creating and sharing resources for women is just one of my favorite things to do. And we do that every week with this show. But another favorite thing of mine is being a career and life coach for women navigating challenging times and helping them get unstuck, explore new possibilities, and find harmony in their careers and lives. So, again, if something in this episode resonates with you and you'd like a fresh perspective, let's chat. The links to connect with Jennifer and me are in the show notes below. And then let's meet again here next Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific time for another inspiring conversation. Because you know what? I do believe it's our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. Until next time, I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, helping you turn transition into triumph.